welcome to your own personal deep dive. Today, we're diving into the thoughts of Blaise Pascal.
Pascal.
And now, before you think dusty old books, this guy was like the 17th century rock star of the mind.
He really was.
Mathematician, physicist, built an early calculator, but we're here for those ideas you send over as thoughts.
And these aren't, your typical polished philosophical arguments. They're more like raw snippets, snapshots of a brilliant mind wrestling with, like, the biggest questions out there.
Okay, so it's like we're getting a peek at this genius's notepad.
Exactly. And what makes them so fascinating, even centuries later, is that they're unfinished. These thoughts, they were actually notes for a larger project. Pascal never got to finish defending the Christian faith.
Oh, wow. So we're getting like a sneak peek into his thought process.
Yeah. And one of the things that jumps out is just how deeply Pascal understood, human nature, that we're this strange mix of brilliance and, let's face it, utter absurdity.
He called it our duality, right?
Exactly.
And, I mean, he nails it with that line, the one, "Man is but a reed, the most feeble thing in nature, but he is a thinking reed." I mean, come on.
Powerful imagery.
One strong breeze, and we're done for, but then our brains go and invent, like, I don't know, calculus.
Right. It's that capacity for thought, that ability to reason that makes us unique. It elevates us, but it also creates this inner tension.
Okay, I'm with you.
On one hand, we're driven to find meaning, some kind of purpose, something bigger than ourselves.
And yet we're totally glued to our phones, binge-watching shows, avoiding anything that makes us think too hard. It's like
distraction.
Yes.
Classic diversion, as Pascal saw. It's not that those things are inherently bad,
right,
but they can keep us from confronting, those bigger, deeper questions about our existence.
So are we just like terrified of our own potential? Is that what you're saying? So we just keep ourselves busy?
It's possible. We fill the void with, anything to avoid facing the abyss. But I think even in those distractions, in chasing those fleeting pleasures, we're kind of admitting, aren't we, that we're looking for happiness somewhere.
Oh, that's a really good point. So would Pascal say that's our problem, that we're looking for happiness in the wrong places?
Absolutely. Pascal believed everyone's chasing happiness. That's not the issue. It's that we often look for it in temporary, fleeting things that ultimately leave us empty.
Okay, so then what? What did he think would bring us happiness?
He believed true happiness could only come from something beyond our earthly experience, something transcendent.
You mean like finding God?
Exactly.
Which brings us to one of his most famous ideas, Pascal's wager.
Right. Arguably one of the most debated concepts in philosophy.
So I have to admit, when I first heard about it, I thought it was like trying to, mathematically prove God's existence.
It's easy to see it that way.
But that PDF you sent over, it really highlighted how it's not about proving anything. It's more like making a calculated bet, which, makes sense coming from a mathematician, right?
Exactly. It was like he took his analytical mind and applied it to faith. Okay, he says, let's look at the possibilities here. If God exists and you believe infinite reward, eternal life.
High stakes.
But if God exists and you don't believe,
Uh-oh.
well, let's just say the consequences are a tad less desirable.
Infinite punishment.
Precisely. But if God doesn't exist...
then it doesn't matter, right?
Exactly. The consequences are temporary either way, whether you lived a good life or not.
So purely based on the potential outcome, believing in God seems like, the safer bet.
That was his point.
It's a fascinating argument, even if you're not religious. You know what I mean?
It's a thought experiment.
Yeah.
And it sparks centuries of debate.
I bet. So what are people saying?
Well, some find it cold, reducing faith to a cost-benefit analysis. Others say it completely misses the point, that genuine desire for spiritual connection.
So it's more nuanced than just, let's place our bets.
Much more. But what struck me was that Pascal wasn't trying to force belief on anyone. He even acknowledged the uncertainty of it all.
He was just putting the idea out there.
Exactly. Here's an interesting thought experiment, he's saying. Think about it.
Use that big brain of yours. Which, hey, that leads us to another one of his big ideas, the whole heart versus reason thing.
Ah, yes. That famous quote, "The heart has its reasons, which reason does not know."
I feel like that one really throws people off, especially coming from a guy known for logic and reason.
It seems paradoxical, doesn't it? But I think what Pascal is getting at is this. There's more to understanding the world, understanding ourselves even, than just pure logic.
So he's not saying we should throw out reason, is he? Just go on gut feeling. Because that doesn't seem very Pascal, does it? And it's like logic gets you to the house, but then it's your heart that, like, picks which way the house faces.
I like that. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's not that reason is useless, but some truths, especially about, well, the human experience, they need more than just logic to really grasp.
It's like when you have a gut feeling about something.
Yeah.
You can't explain it, but you just, like, know it's right.
Exactly. And for Pascal, that was how we connect with God. Reason can point us in the right direction, but it takes that leap of faith, is surrendering to something beyond ourselves.
Okay, so it's all kind of connected then, this whole duality thing, our search for happiness, the wager, heart and reason. It's like Pascal created this, like, this map of what it means to be human. Messy and complex and everything.
And you know what's remarkable is how much Pascal was grappling with centuries ago really foreshadows a lot of what we now call existentialism.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, that feeling of being, adrift in this vast universe, we're free to make our own choices, but then we're also burdened by that freedom, that responsibility. Pascal was wrestling with all that back in the 1600s.
It's kind of crazy to think about how these big questions about, like, why we're here, what it all means, they never really go away.
They're timeless. And that's probably why his thoughts still resonate with people so strongly, even today.
Yeah, totally. So much of what he was saying, it's still relevant, even if you don't necessarily agree with all his religious views.
Absolutely. Because at their core, his observations about why we do, what what we're all searching for deep down, it's incredibly insightful.
So for someone who's like, okay, Pascal, I'm intrigued, but where do I even start? What's the one thing, the key takeaway you hope they walk away with after this deep dive?
That's a great question. I think for me, it's the courage to acknowledge our own limitations. The fact that we're finite beings. We're capable of great things, absolutely. But we're also prone to making mistakes, to getting distracted.
Oh, tell me about it.
Right. But maybe, just maybe, as Pascal suggests, that's okay. True fulfillment, a deeper sense of happiness, it might come from embracing that paradox, from acknowledging our flaws and seeking something greater than ourselves.
So not trying to fill that void, that existential void with, like, the latest iPhone or, getting more followers or whatever.
Exactly. It's about looking deeper. And that might be a spiritual path for some, a connection with something transcendent. For others, it might be finding purpose in their work, their relationships.
It all starts with being honest with ourselves, right?
Absolutely. About our motivations, our fears, even the things we avoid thinking about too deeply.
Because we all do that, right? Avoid those big questions.
We all do it. It's natural. But it's in confronting those questions, grappling with them, that we start to understand our place in the grand scheme of things.
And maybe find a little bit of peace along the way.
Exactly.
It's funny, though, we keep coming back to the fact that those thoughts were never meant to be like a polished, finished product, right?
It's true. They were notes for something bigger, a larger argument he was building.
And yet there's something kind of powerful about that unfinished quality.
Yeah.
Like, we're being invited to join the conversation, to complete the thought process ourselves.
Precisely. It's interactive in a way.
He's not just, like, handing us the answers. It's more about making us ask the right questions.
Yeah, and it's like he's giving us permission to be okay with not having all the answers.
Absolutely. And in a world obsessed with, like, instant gratification, instant answers, that's a pretty radical idea.
Totally. So if we're trying to sum up, like, the essence of our Pascal deep dive here, what do we have?
Well, we've got that fascinating duality of being human, right? Capable of such amazing things, yet, let's face it, we can be pretty ridiculous too.
They contain multitudes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's that whole idea that true happiness, lasting fulfillment, it probably isn't waiting for us at the bottom of that social media feed or on the next level of that video game.
We got to dig a little deeper. We do. And maybe, just maybe, some of the most important truths, the ones that really resonate deep down, those are the ones we feel more than we can rationally explain.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's about trusting that inner voice, that intuition, even when it doesn't fit into a neat, logical box.
Which, let's be honest, can be a little scary, right?
It can be, but it can also be incredibly freeing.
It's wild to think that Pascal was onto all of this back in the 1600s.
Yeah.
It's like, what would he say about our world today? With all the technology, the information overload, would he even recognize us?
It's fascinating to consider, isn't it? I mean, he was writing during a time of immense change. Scientific discoveries were turning the world upside down. Religious institutions were being challenged, kind of like today when you think about it.
Yeah, totally.
We've got our own anxieties, our own uncertainties, social media, artificial intelligence, climate change. It's a lot. But what's amazing is how much Pascal's insights still resonate. it makes you wonder, what new thoughts would he have for us?
It's like, would he still see us as that thinking reed, fragile yet capable of incredible things? Or would he just be like, whoa, what happened?
I have a feeling he'd still recognize that essential human heart, that deep-seated yearning for meaning, for connection, for something bigger than ourselves. That hasn't changed no matter how technologically advanced we become.
It always comes back to those essential questions, doesn't it? The ones that never really go away, no matter what century you're living in.
Exactly. And maybe that's the beauty of engaging with these great thinkers, these minds from the past, like Pascal. It's not about finding the answer. It's about joining that ongoing conversation, that timeless exploration of what it means to be human.
To be that thinking reed, trying to make sense of it all. Well said. Well, on that note, as you continue to ponder Pascal's thoughts, we've got one last thought bubble to leave you with. If Pascal were writing today, in our world of instant connection and constant information, what new insights would he add to his collection of thoughts? What would he observe about us? We'll leave you with that image. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep those brains buzzing.